שמע שיר חדש
Shalom, everyone. I'd like to dedicate this year to the neshama of Ilana Miral Bas Shmuel, whose shiva is being observed. She was a woman who was described as constantly being immersed in Avodas Hashem, in Kiruv, in Chasidus, and especially in the Indian of Mea Brachos B'chol Yom, saying a bracha each day. And I think that this year really typifies this neshama, and we'll explain how. I'd like to cover a lot of ground with you today, put together a rather large picture of the events that properly precede the onset of the 9 days, which begins this Friday with Chodesh, as well as the going out of Bamidbar simultaneously, which carries the stories of Pinchas, Moshe's final days, the selection of Yehoshua, and the war of Midian and its accountability. So these things do not seem on the surface to be rather connected, but when you look a little bit at what the Midrashim are teaching us, and from our Svarim Kedoshim, an incredible theme emerges. Okay, so let's point out a few questions. Okay, number one, Reish Lakish said in the Medrash, Bamidbar Rabbah, Chav Hey, he said, Pinchas zu Eliyahu. This key figure of the last three parshiot, essentially, of Bamidbar, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, he is the identical soul as Eliyahu HaNavi. Eliyahu HaNavi, we know, is the harbinger of Geula. What's the connection? What does that mean that Pinchas is Eliyahu? And how does that demonstrate itself in the parshas that we're reading? Number one. Number two, the war of Midian is unlike any other war the Jewish people fight. So let me explain. There is something called Milchemes Mitzvah and Milchemes Rishus, an obligatory war and a non-obligatory war, but one that's being fought for either military threat and or financial defense or gain. So, for example, David HaMelech conquered Syria, Halavai today, and therefore Syria has a special status. It's not the biblical Eretz Yisrael, at least not past Damascus. Up until Damascus, yes. And what's ironic today is that Israel is being called upon by its friends, the Druze, of Jews and Druze. And I'll show you how that's also incredibly relevant today to the city of Damascus. Damascus is the biblical boundary of Eretz Yisrael. And here we are, the Jews are calling upon Israel, which has already taken a chunk of territory on the base of Har Hermon to protect the Druze, and now the Jews are under complete assault by Islamic neighbors, because the Druze are not Muslims. I'll explain what they're all about in a moment. And they have nowhere to turn for protection except to the Jewish people, which is ironic. And we'll see, B'ez Hashem, hopefully they will survive and thrive. But it's not a given. And so when David HaMelech conquered Syria, it got a status of land of Israel beyond the biblical status. In other words, beyond Damascus, which is up until the biblical border of Eretz Yisrael is the entrance to Damascus. Beyond that, David HaMelech conquered and has a halacha of Eretz Yisrael regarding things such as whether you're allowed to allow goyim to purchase homes, to rent fields or purchase fields. So Syria has certain restrictions because it's called kibush yachid. It was the individual conquest that David HaMelech initiated for whatever reasons, as explained. And that war is called Milchemet Rishut. In the wars of Milchemes Mitzvah, even a Kala and a Chassan from their chuppah are called to join the battle. Notice, no distinction between Chassan and Kala, but the point is that obviously they're not carrying equal battle roles, but they are all to join in the war effort in whatever capacity is appropriate for them. And then, although we know today that there are many women who are combat fighters in Israel, though recently I did see a report that it's not an ideal situation, not for the army and not for the women, because of the propensity to injuries and the rigorous amount of strength training, etc., that is demanded is maybe not appropriate for every woman. Maybe some, yes, but not the majority. Whereas the majority of men are expected to be able to carry these maneuvers out, physical, and otherwise. So everybody agrees that there's a slightly different role, and no one's to say that they are any less valuable. But the idea being that there are rules for kibush yachid, kibush rabim, and then there's the war of midyan, which is none of the above. So again, in the wars of mitzvah include the battle against Amalek and the battle against the 7 nations of Canaan who are occupying our land, and to rid ourselves of them. Okay. Then you have, and that everybody's involved with, and then you have Mechemes Rishus, in which a select group of soldiers are drafted, but even though everybody basically is showing up for service, there are dispensations, and the Meshuach Milchama, the Kohen, and those who are assisting him, calls out and says, Mi shebana bayis velo chanocho, a person who built a home but didn't live in it yet, planted a vineyard but did not partake of it yet, the fruits of the vineyard, or engaged a woman with halachic marriage but has not consummated that marriage yet with chuppah, they can return. Of course, it's a guise under which people who are afraid of the battle because they fear that they're not holding on an incredible spiritual connection with Hashem, and maybe they have sins and they're just not feeling that they can hold the incredible level of emunah that's required to go into battle and feel Hashem's protection. So they are allowed to go home. All right. Here in Mechemes Midyan, it's neither. A select group of Sayeret Matkal, Shaldagim, Marines, Israeli Marines, whatever you want to call them, Jewish select fighters, 1,000 per tribe, were assigned to this mission that Hashem gave Moshe Rabbeinu. By the way, it was the final act of Moshe Rabbeinu of war and of any consequence to the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, or the distribution of Eretz Yisrael. All that was taken care of already, or would be taken care of later by his Talmidim, by Yeshua, and by Elazar Kohen Gadol, and to a certain extent Pinchas, as we shall see. But the Moshe Rabbeinu's final act is the war against Midian. Ironically, it was the episode with Zimri ben Salu, who in public married a Midianite woman, Kozbi Batsur, which triggered the response of Pinchas, who is known as Eliyahu, according to Ish Lakish, according to our most basic rabbinic sources, the Talmudic sources, not later, Talmudic sources, and that goes back, emerges as the Kanoi. As Chazal tells, the story unfolds that Moshe Rabbeinu declared death upon 156,000 people who would serve the idol of Pa'or. Now let's understand what Pa'or is. Pa'or, according to Chazal, it's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, in Avodah Zarah, the Mishnah says, HaPa'or Atzmo, the Pa'or is chayav. The way you serve it is by defecating in front of it. What does that mean? It seems to be such a disgusting act. But why? But on the same time, Klal Yisrael were called nitzmadim l'bal pa'or. They were so attached to it they couldn't detach. What was there to be attached about? I mean, just want to run out of there as quickly as possible. What's the big attachment? And secondarily, the ridding of this incident was triggered by the Eitzah of Bilam, who ironically had gone to Midian to collect his share for the bitter advice and very effective advice that he gave to Balak to release the women of Midian primarily, and Moab as well, Although the Moabite women don't get killed because they know Rus is going to emanate. Actually, would emanate from Balak himself. But the Midianite women were mafkir themselves, and this created this plague of 24,000. That Pinchas's intervention by killing Cosby and Zimri, who were consummating this act in public, stopped that plague. There was machlokas in the Rishonim, Rashi and Ramban. What happened to the 156,000 that were certainly guilty? Rashi brings the medrash that Moshe said, each shofet, remember, sorry, alafim, there were captains of thousands, captains of hundreds, captains of tens, right? So if you add up even just the captains of tens, that's already 6,000 right there. The total number was 7,800 judges. Each one was supposed to kill 2, and that would have yielded 156,000 defendants that would have been judged, tried, and killed for being nitzma, for being so passionately attached to Baal Peor. But comes along Zimri and says, wait a minute, Moshe, you married a woman from Midian. Of course, it's referring to the daughter of Yisro, who's a player here, by the way, a big player, because the Druze, who are currently in the news, who have asked the Jews to rescue them, see themselves as descendants of Yisro. And they actually consider his supposed burial place in northern Israel to be their Makom Kadosh. They are not Muslims. They do not follow the teachings of the Oso Arabi, of the father of Islam, but they are descendants of Yisro. So Moshe was said, "You married Yisro's daughter. What's wrong with What's wrong with Midianites? They're awesome." And so therefore, I want to marry a Midianite woman. And no one could say anything except we know Pinchas steps forward and he says, "You taught us, Moshe Rabbeinu, when you came down from Sinai, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, a chok, not a thing that's rooted in any rational principle. It's a law that roots out of passion against Chilul Hashem and the pride of the Jewish people, much like Shimon and Levi's destruction of the city of Shechem was an act of kana'ut, and all the brothers actually participated in that. And because he said, "Hakazona Yaseh," could it be that Dina Bas Yaacov should be treated so immorally? So here again, Pinchas steps forward in the persona of a zealot, which is of course what Eliyahu Navi later is declared. He declares himself to be a zealot because he's the last remaining prophet who could speak up against the wicked King Achav and his wife Izebel, who destroyed the Nevi'ah Yisrael. And of course, that led to the contest on Har Carmel, where Eliyahu Navi mocks the Navim of Baal and produces a miracle that a fire comes from Shemayim and licks up his carbon, which was completely soaked in water in the pit around it, whereas the Nevi'ah Baal called out to their God all day long and no fire emerged from heaven. And Eliyahu called himself a kanoi. But Hashem does with Eliyahu. We'll get there in a moment. Kanos is a difficult subject. Moshe Rabbeinu could not endorse Yisro, Pinchas, to carry out the act against Zimri and Cosby, but he did say the following: if you're the one who read the letter, in other words, the one who reminded us about the halacha Moshe Sinai that I taught you, that habo al Aramis kanoim pokenbo, if you actually had relations with an Aramis, which is a woman from that general region, Aram Naharayim, where Lavan came from, where Terach was, and so on, and where Avram was before he came to Eretz Yisrael, you may kanoim pokenbo, you can kill that person. However, Moshe was reticent because the halacha l'maisa is in Shulchan Aruch and Mishpat that it's not like he's a convicted criminal. If that kanoi, if that zealot comes for his life while he's proceeding to this act in public with warning, according to the Ramah, then he can defend himself. And if he kills his attacker, he'll be free in self-defense. This is not like Misas Bezdin where we capture a guy and execute him. No, it's not quite. It's something in the middle. It's a it's a extrajudicial killing, but it has roots in Halacha Moshe Sinai. So what is it? Okay, so that's really a question in itself. So the war of Midian would be led by this zealot Pinchas, again, meaning giving a unique character to this war versus the regular Mechemes Rishus and the regular Mechemes Mitzvah. So again, it was 1,000 select soldiers, okay, Marines, whatever you want to call them, and they did something very unusual. All right, they captured all of the booty, and were as outlined in great detail in Pashas Masas Maseh. They gave a full and intricate and detailed accounting of every single item that they took from the Midianites, animals, minerals, people, okay, and divided it accordingly between the tribes and a portion to the Kohanim. That's not exactly how it goes. In a Mechemes Mitzvah, everything is, like Amalek, things are put into Cherem, right? And if that's the case, you eradicate everybody. In the wars of the seven nations, you eradicate everybody. But here, those women who did not have the ability to participate in the sinning, because they were too young, that they hadn't developed, they weren't at a stage in which they could even have relations, were spared. Okay, and that's unusual. That's unusual. And why was it it was measured by their ability to have relations. That's a strange thing. It doesn't exist in any other circumstance. So we must understand the context of this war, the role of Pinchas, because after all, no one can go home because they only selected 1,000 per tribe. So there's no need for a Meshuach Milchama, for a priest. We heard that Pinchas got Bris Kunas Olam, Brisi Shalom, so he was now transformed to a Kohen. There is a role of a Kohen in war, in a war which is a Mechemes Rishus, which you can send home those who are scared and so on. But these guys were the Marines, and it was only 1,000 people. No one's going home. They were select soldiers. So what was Pinchas doing there? And in fact, Pinchas is the key to the war, because part of what happens is that luckily Bilam finds himself trying to collect money from Midian for the disaster, the 24,000 that were killed, instead of, or in addition to, according to perhaps Rashi versus Ramban, because of the close, passionate connection to Baal Peor, he succeeds in using the tzitz, which carries the name of Chodesh Lashem, which is usually attributed to the Kohen Gadol, which Pinchas would later become a Kohen Gadol, right? To cause Bilam's magic to recede, and he would fall from the sky, where he had transformed himself into a flying creature, along with all of the his cohorts in Midian that he wanted to get paid from, so he kept them alive, I guess, as soon as he wanted his paycheck. Okay, we made the bracha already previously. What does that whole episode have to do? And why are these parshas always demanded to be at the portal of the 9 days? Because Devarim must be read on Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbos preceding Tisha B'Av, as it will next week. Okay, so we have a lot of things to think about. So let's recap. A lot of curiosities here. Number one, the problem that we're encountering is trying to understand the inyan of this war of Midian. It's weird accountability standards, just to the nth degree, which we don't see elsewhere. You certainly don't hear about it in great detail, and yet it's detailed here so dramatically. Why the detail? What's the big deal? Why only 1,000 soldiers? Why not conform to the laws of Mechemes Mitzvah or Mechemes Rishus? It seems to be a unique, sui generis type of war. Tzroras HaMidyanim, it's a Mechemes Hashem. It's a different type of war. Why is this war the punctuation of the end of Dvarim, end of Bamidbar, which is the last act of Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership prior, of course, to his passing, and of course, Sefer Dvarim is his final exhortations to Klal Yisrael, the entire of it, and his blessings to Klal Yisrael. But this was his final act as king. What's the kesher? Why does Bilam suddenly resurface here? Why is it Pinchas, who is a Kohen and leading what seems to be a war, allowed to use the tzitz of the Kohen Gadol? We know in Hilchos Brachos that when it comes to duchening, someone who was killed is not allowed to duchen. It's a question if you can duchen or not. It's a big question in Halacha L'maisa. Someone who killed even accidentally, are they capable of giving the bris shalom? The shalom means the opposite of milchama. Milchama is about death and killing. Shalom is shalom. How could it be that Pinchas got a bris shalom for an act of essentially warfare? These things are all facts that we have seen our entire lives, but how does it piece together, and what's the message? So, I'd like to suggest an incredible concept, which we've already really stated, that explains why this is Moshe's final act, why it's such a unique war, why there's accounting, why Pinchas is involved, why Pinchas is Eliyahu, and also the remote connection to Yisro through the fact that this is a war in Midian, and what's the purpose there. So, let me explain. When you are Kanoi, the halacha Moshe Misinai of Kanoim Pogimbo exists in a couple of circumstances. Okay, for example, a Kohen who comes to the Beis Hamikdash Tameh, and he enters the grounds of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, and he does the service, whatever avodah that might be, Torah, bringing the pieces to the sacrifice, Rikas Adam, etc., halacha, haba, whatever. He does one of the malachos. It says, Ein echav hakohanim. This is a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. Mevino so lebezdin. They don't bring him to Bezdin. They do an extrajudicial killing. El pirchei kahuna, pirchei, the blossoming kohanim. Motzina sochos lazar. They take him out of the zara where death and tuma are not counterindicated. And mafzian es mocho begazirim. What? They puncture his head with bats, with gazirim, with huge pieces of wood. They beat his head in with a bat. What? Since when is this mutilation consistent with Jewish law of executions, which we always say, b'or lo misa yafeh? We try to minimize the nivel question of how you do hereg with a sword, that the body shouldn't collapse, because they used to execute people standing up, or they used the guillotine or whatever it was. And that guy, they just beat him. They bashed his head in with baseball bats. There is such a Jewish character in recent Lahavdol of adult cinema lore. There was an important, fantastically important movie about the Holocaust. In my opinion, the name is a little problematic, but it's Inglorious So-and-So's, where it depicts a fictional story of Jewish soldiers taking revenge against Nazis. And one of the soldiers who terrified the Nazis was known as the Bear Jew. Well, the Bear Jew, what he did was he used a baseball bat and he broke the heads of Nazis who weren't cooperative in giving them information or whatever else they wanted from them or to kill them. It's a Bear Jew. So the Kohanim, the Pirchei Kohanim, acted like Bear Jews. Wow, how could such a thing be sanctioned? And why call them Pirchei Kahuna, the blossoming Kohanim? Similar, it seems to be, like the zealousy of Pinchas, who got the opportunity to be called the Kohen. And how do you resolve the problem of shalom? That a Kohen killing is not associated with the mitzvah of Birkas Kohanim at all, of being shalom. Okay. So here we go. What was missing? What was the final element that would boost the Jewish people to break the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, to overcome Tisha B'Av of 40 years before, that sealed the fate of a generation, in order to not make that mistake once more, in order to be able to set the tone of going in and conquering and transforming the 9 days from days of Avelos to days of Simcha in the Beis Hamikdash. How? There was one ingredient that needed to come, maybe a little bit from out of bounds of the extrajudicial world, but included in Halach Moshe Sinai, and that would be passion and purpose, a unique passion and purpose to battle the scourge of Chilul Hashem, of taking the sacred and turning it into unholy. Taking the holy and turning it into unholy triggers kana'ut. Jewish people needed the personality of Pinchas, who is Eliyahu, to make it through the challenges that they would face in Eretz Yisrael. Only Eliyahu was able to stand up to the Melech Achav and Izebel and call them out. But he becomes something more than a dangerous zealot. So here too, the message is, let's put it together. Baal Pa'or represents this polar opposite to this experience of Pinchas. What is Baal Pa'or? The Jews were tzemudim. What does it mean, the excrement? So some Mefarshim explain that it doesn't mean that you go there when you need to, you take a laxative and you go there. That's not what it means. It's more akin to what I will tell you. I don't know if I say Lavdil. Once I experienced when I had some time to visit the Jewish community in Berkeley and give some Shiurim there. I have a unusual connection there. My daughter was born there. And I went through the campus of University of Berkeley, which is of course a really problematic, but back then it was bad, but it wasn't what it is today, for that matter. Most universities were a lot better than Berkeley, but today I don't know, it might be worse. Berkeley is notoriously leftist, notoriously anti-Israel, especially the Jews are big supporters of Palestine and anti-Israel and so on, professors and so on. But they were trying to take down the trees on the campus of UC Berkeley. Ironically, the Berkeley Bears, just like the Bear Jews. So the Bear Jews, or whoever they were tree huggers. They climbed up the tree and were holding tightly to the tree so that nobody would dare chop it down. Because after all, what's more important? Building another building for a university, a world-renowned university, or cutting down an old oak tree, or whatever it might be, in a cedar tree. They have beautiful trees up there in Northern California. Beautiful. So, and ancient. These people were called tree sitters. And it was well known that they were given hours, maybe they were given 24-hour jobs to literally be up a tree. What happens when you need to go to the bathroom? Well, the obvious happened. They didn't come down. Because if they come down, they lose their strong connection to the tree. They did what they had to do and paid the consequences. That's the example of Baal Pa'or. Baal Pa'or means such a passionate connection that you just can't leave. Smudim leBaal Pa'or. There's no way to separate them. There's no way to divide them. They're aduk. They're completely stuck in this passion. So it's the avodah zarah of passionate embrace. That's total passionate embrace. Incredible. And that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing to tame. It took a lot of kanos for Pinchas to put out that fire. The fire that was represented by the tzimidus, the connection, the intimate connection between a Jewish prince and a Midianite princess. They were bound together and they refused to separate. And Pinchas actually had to kill them while they were bound together in an embrace, because that's the only way that he could demonstrate that his kanos was appropriate. So kanos is an appropriate response in a very limited, narrow window of cases. When they see the Jewish people, when the Jewish people seem to so violate their connection with Hashem, that it becomes a great Chilul Hashem, that's when the heter of Kanoim Pogembo comes into play. Like a Kohen who desecrates the Beis Hamikdash willfully, and like a Boal Aramis, a person who intermarries willfully, trying to say that there can be an intimate connection between the Jewish world and the non-Jewish world, and it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. No, you can't bind together things that are not alike. One of the reasons that the symbolism of Bilam, who finds his death here with a donkey, is if to show saying, and Medrash is quite clear that this was a bestial relationship, and a bestiality was as a model. Hashem was saying, no, a human being and a chamor cannot be a unit. It's not a unit. Of course, it will never produce anything. In fact, we learned recently in the Gemara and Avodah Zarah that human-animal relations causes the animals themselves not to be able to reproduce. So if you're destroying life, you're certainly not making life. But Bilam's thought was that he could be connected to Hashem on a level that Klal Yisrael is, and it's just not possible. Our passion is directed towards the Kedusha. Our passion is a kosher passion. There's kosher passion and non-kosher passion. You can be very passionate about a lot of things, about a lot of averos, about a lot of taivos. Very, very passionate, very, very connected to it, very addicted to it. That's the key word, addiction. It's like an addiction. There's no way out, no escape, unless there's a massive intervention. Pinchas represents a massive intervention, but also he presents a kosher passion. Now you can understand. This was a missing ingredient that Klal Yisrael desperately needed before they would face the challenges of encountering other foreign nations, temptations, and gods going to Eretz Yisrael. They need an azus de kedusha. They needed a Pinchas spirit to be able to penetrate the world that they were encountering and be able to remain holy. Now you understand why the war with Midian was a select group of 1,000 men, and why we learn the parsha of vows was given to the Roshei Matos, to the heads of these warriors tribes, because a vow connects you to Hashem in an extrajudicial way. I'm going to vow, Hashem, not to partake of this and this, so that I'll be a Nazir, and I'm not going to indulge in wine because I want to improve. I want to turn my passions towards Hashem and not away from Hashem. And they were such a Nazir that can be commended. On the other hand, just depriving yourself from wine is an Avera. Every Nazir is a crime of passion, because ultimately Hashem didn't design the world for abstention and extremes, but He designed the world that you should indulge and enjoy, but only channel it through Kedusha. Channel it through Kedusha, not through a passion for something foreign to who we in essence are. Klal Yisrael are bound to Eretz Yisrael with a passion. Where is the passion for the land of Israel? Is it so easily dispensable? It is one of the greatest violations of the will of many tzaddikim, and particularly the Baal Rebbe, that so much of Eretz Yisrael has been forfeited, and we only continuously suffer. And if over this 9 days, Hamas comes out victorious, all right, maybe we'll get some hostages back, but essentially that they're rehabilitated, vindicated, and remain in their place, what a tragic outcome that would be. That's the old kind of 9 days. We don't want those kind of 9 days anymore. We believe we're ready for a better form of 9 days. The only victory over Gaza is Jewish control, which ironically is pretty much what's going on. It has to remain that way. Not only has to remain that way, but the passion for settling that portion of Eretz Yisrael, which is clearly Eretz Yisrael according to the biblical boundaries, there's nothing to talk about. All the way to Wadi Al-Arish is the biblical boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. But where's the passion? Where's the passion to retake Yehuda and Shema? Recently, a couple of Hasidim, who were Kanoim, made their way to Kever Yosef, which is in the city of Shechem, and maybe even Kever Yehoshua. I think so too, which is also not ironically Yeshua in that area. Okay, And because of their excursions, there were battles with the Palestinian, army, whatever they call themselves, police. And Israel was forced to retake the area and secure it. By who? By people who were passionate about that place. So, oh, people are going to come here? Fine, fine. Then we'll have to dig in and protect. Nobody's coming here? Forget about it. Who needs it? Who are we protecting it for? So we have to demonstrate our passion. I think davening, at least daven our passion for the whole of Eretz Israel, the same way our enemies mirror that to us. It's incredible what they mirror back to us. Every single inch of Eretz Israel, the entire world wants every inch of Eretz Israel to be evacuated by Jews. This is one of the international greatest obsessions in world history. Get the Jews off the land of Israel. They cannot control the land of Israel, not 1 inch. And begrudgingly, they'll say, okay, maybe a little bit, only because we're in the era of Mashiach. And they're so guilted by what they have done to us, but not that guilty, not that guilty. Also, the reason why we learn the laws of kashrus, the laws of purging, the laws of cleansing, all the pots and pans that they collected from Midian, throw them out, burn them, put them in a cherem. What do we need them for? No, 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 no. I'm going to show you that certain pots, it's actually ironically Daf Yomi also, you can, if it's used for cold, you can kosher it by 3 fills and spills in 24 hours. Today's Daf Yomi. Or you can, if it was used in hot and it's metal, you can put it through Hagala and boiling water. Everything according to its need. A shpud, which is raw, which is placed on raw meat and burnt directly over the fire. That needs libun. That means you gotta, the way you do it, the way it was used is the way it's kashered. Here, from this week's parsha, and chas v'shalom, that anybody, and the warriors, the 12,000 warriors, when they came back, they offered karbanos that they weren't even chayiv to bring, but they offered karbanos that voluntarily, if they had a thought of touching a Midianite woman, precisely the polar opposite of Zimri and Cosby, who tried to connect like Baal Peor beyond belief. They're saying, we are mefurad, am levadad yishkon, and not only that, but we know how to take things that are needed for life, pots and pans and all kinds of things, and kasher it to use it for Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Wow. And we all share the wealth. This was the lesson of the War of Midian. It's a profound lesson that without passion and without ability of clarity and separation, there is not adequate preparation for Eretz Yisrael. Had Klal Yisrael proceeded into Eretz Yisrael with Zimri and Cosby in tow, their fate would have been quite different. Now, ironically, at the very end of these episodes, we'll get to Eliyahu in a moment and we'll close it at that time. What happens to Yoshua? Why did Yoshua get the job, even? Well, in last week's parsha in Pinchas, Moshe Rabbeinu asks for the job for his sons. He says, after all, everybody's getting Yerusha. Levim don't have Yerusha. Can I at least offer Yerusha to my sons that they'll take over for me? They're great guys, right? Gershom and Eliezer, great guys. Let them get the job. Hashem says no. He is a Yifka Elohim Elokei Ruchos. Hashem, who knows the psychology and the emotional needs of people, pick somebody who can lead them. And Hashem says, I got the great guy, the greatest guy, your Talmud Yoshua. What was Yoshua famous for? Lo Yom Moshe Ohel. He was Davuk to Moshe. Holy passion, holy connection. He couldn't leave Moshe. He was always in his tent. He was always fixing the chairs for every meeting, washing up, scrubbing, washing the dishes. He couldn't move from Moshe. So enamored was he of the Kedusha of Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, I can't let go of Kedusha. So that's the game. And that's the point. People are like that. Elokei Ruchos. People get passionate about things. We've got to get passionate. Otherwise, we're dead. Got to get passionate about something. And we have the ability to focus and fixate. That's the way of a husband and wife. They're supposed to be literally the basar echad. And that's our challenges in marriage, is all when there's a lack of passion and purpose, of the unity of the marriage. This is a long, long subject, way beyond today. How do you forge unity of passion and purpose in marriage? Great question. How do you form union of passion and purpose in Torah mitzvos? The passion for Talmud Torah. You know, we say that when you come into the Chodesh of Av, Mishnichnas Av, Mayatim B'Simcha. Well, what do you do? What does that mean practically? No weddings, no wine, which connects people, gets them to loosen up and be happy and friendly. No new clothes, which makes you feel great about yourself and you want to go out and show them off to other people and be with other people. It's exactly the point. We mitigate passion. There are even some who suggest very big chumrah. We don't hold that way. That just like on Tisha B'Av, you should separate husband and wife. So too, some people refrain the entire 9 days. That is not the halacha. But there is, and certainly not Leil Tefillah, chas v'shalom, but the night of going to the mikveh, chas v'shalom. But there is such a thing. It's called hester panim. Hester panim means the absence of passion, turning away. When you turn away from something, it's the opposite of what Baal Pur represented. Complete connection, like the tree huggers. The tree huggers. Be a hugger, but you can do a virtual hug. You can do a passionate hug. Was the embrace of Rabbi Akiva and his wife, when he was absent for 24 years, any less of an embrace of love than anybody else who worked together for 24 years? Go ask yourself that question. That was a marriage of passion and purpose, even though they saw each other quite irregularly. But in the end, he said, I know everything is from you. Rabbi Akiva says, whatever I've accomplished is only because I had that relationship with you. Had I not had the relationship with you, I couldn't have the relationship with Torah and my Talmidim. It's a massive lesson. But what happens to Yeshua and Pinchas later? They go later as they enter Israel, not that long after this episode of the 40th year. Yeshua sends Pinchas and also sends Caleb to spy the land of Yericho. And they find there a woman who's described as a woman of passion. Her profession was, she had a brothel. Okay, Rachav Hazona. Shocking. And they tell her, for saving our lives and for telling us that the natives in Yericho and Eretz Yisrael have lost their passion for the land. They're too scared to be passionate. They're frightened. They're very frightened of Bnei Israel, who seem to have this connection with Hashem that's going to lift Eretz Yisrael from under our fingers. But they say to her, we'll save you. You can cling to us and you will live, you and your family, for saving us, keeping us in your quarters. What a place to go to be saved. They put them up on the roof under the vegetables, but why there? Why there? That's where passion resided, but now is going to be turned into a passion of kedusha. She puts down the red string out of her window, right? The scarlet woolen signal that this is where her family lived. That's a sign. Red is a sign of passion, daming. And guess what? Yoshua and Rachav become marriage partners. Shocking. Why would he take Rachav? Of all the women he could marry in Klal Yisrael, who wouldn't want to marry Yehoshua? The king, the prince, the Ephraimite leader, the conqueror of the land of Israel. What a shidduch! Talmud of Moshe Rabbeinu. He has the hod of Moshe Rabbeinu. Who would ever dare suggest such a shidduch for Yehoshua? No, Yeshua knew better. Yeshua said, she represents the key ingredient that we need to be able to fulfill Hashem's mission with passion and purpose. And she is my wife. And I will turn it all for the good. So the pathway through the end of Bamidbar, as it plows its way through the 9 days, and that's why it's they counterindicate each other, is Mishenichnas Av Mematim Besimcha, but the Svarim Kadoshim, since the Baal Shem Tov, since we entered clearly the era of Mashiach, in our days, from the pinnacle of the year 1740, which represents 5,500, and the dawn of the day of Gula, the last 500 years of history, which we only have a couple hundred, about 214 to go, and a lot's going to happen before then. Bez Hashem, in our lifetime, Eliyahu will appear, the Kanoi, and that is what the bigger picture of these parshios, Chazak, the parshas Chazak, Matos Maaseh, passion with accountability, passion with holiness, but passion, not absent of passion, not cold, not without simcha. Those are the things we get passionate about: marriage, celebration, wine, song, even Torah. We are prohibited to learn because Torah is simcha, and simcha ala Torah. That holy passion is what needs to be ignited to sail through this period of time. Just as a final note, I want to make a ha'ara. We'll read a Mishnah about Eliyahu Rabbi, and this is a key point about Pinchas too. Ultimately, the goal of Kanos is not only to reignite or redirect false passion, but it's to bring shalom, to bring peace. Some suggest that Pinchas really didn't deserve the role of Kohen Gadol until he fostered peace. Because he did save lives. He saved a lot of lives, but there was an episode at the beginning of our entry years into Eretz Yisrael, where at the very beginning of the sections of Sefer Yeshua, so etc., that the tribes of Reuven and God had made a giant altar, and the rest of Klal Yisrael felt that they were breaking away and going into Avodah Zarah rather quickly. Pinchas goes, investigates, and comes back with the information that no, they are not trying to secede from Eretz Yisrael. That Mizbeach is an act of passionate love for Hashem and for you, the rest of the Jewish people. It's a demonstration of love, karban, karov, that they should be close to us, connected to us. So in other words, they took the message and said, we need to be passionate about Eretz Yisrael, even if we're on the other side of the Jordan, even if we're all the way, if we're living in Syria over there. That's going to be eventually a portion of Eretz Yisrael, at least through David HaMelech and certainly in Melech Mashiach. And Yisro, who the Druze are just on the other side of the Golan, see as their forefather, passionately stuck to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's the opposite of Cosby and Zimri. It's the Midianite who gave his daughter in holiness to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what Yisro is. The Druze, in some way, are associated with us, much as Yisro is associated with us, and the Canaan, his descendants, have a special place. They're not our enemies, and they're not. But hopefully they will survive and thrive in this very, very difficult environment. But finally, Yehoshua, by seeing Reuvenites and gods in their holy passion and not in Chas v'Shalom, Baal Pa'or type of passion, he blessed them, and he at that point became fulfilled of the blessing he got of Briti Shalom. He kept the Jewish people whole. He kept the Jewish people from breaking off, not only in his act of violence, but also, more importantly, in his act of negotiation of peace. Maybe he had to violently excise the foreign nations trying to cling and overpower us, much like Shimon did and Levi did with the city of Shechem that wanted to cling to us, and we had to separate them out. But Brisi Shalom, maybe that's why Eliyahu Hanavi comes to every bris and comes to every Seder. Those are the 2 points in which the Jewish people really, really separate from the nations of the world. Other holidays, everybody comes to holidays, but a bris milah, that's the point in which the Gentile world says, Ad Kan. The Kedusha that this represents, and the Malchus Shamayim and the Karban, and the restraint of passion and so on that it all represents, not really viable. And then also the Seder, with its deep restrictions of chametz and matzah, but at the same time, in Muna, in the Geula, That's not a place for a non-Jew. In fact, the Gemara Pesachim speaks about non-Jews who boasted that they had snuck in to eat from the Karban Pesach, but ultimately they were exposed. It's not a place for them. Eliyahu Hanavi comes to affirm the great passion between Hashem and the Jewish people forever. Those moments are peak moments. Eliyahu is our witness. Eliyahu comes, and Bezos Hashem, that's why he's the forebearer of Mashiach. Why? Because he introduces the kosher kanaos that we need in order to make Eretz Yisrael become really joined with the Jewish people. We're physically here in many ways, but do we have that passion for every inch of Eretz Yisrael that Chazal did, that our enemies do, that the world does? Let's hope we can touch that in this. So we are looking forward to transforming these 9 days in the spirit of the Baal Shem Tov, Mishenichnas Av, Ma'atin B'Simcha. We reduce our pain and suffering about the loss and control of the nations of the world over the Jewish people and our exile, and our internal exile, and our internal lack of achdus, and machlokes, and sinas chinam, which of course destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. And we say, you know what? With simcha, we can accomplish it with simcha and connection to Hashem. And this woman that we're dedicated this year to was an example of being connected to Hashem all day long. Always a vort, always a kiruv moment, always a chesed moment, always a bracha moment. That's it. That's what David HaMelech, the outcome of the passion, the tfilos of Moshe of David HaMelech, is that he's preceded by Eliyahu Hanavi, who will bring him. The last thing is the Mishnah says at the very end of Edios, about curious Mishnah about Pinchas / Eliyahu. He says, Amar Rabbi Yeshua, Edios Perikhet Mishnah Zayin. Mekubal ani Ram Yocham Zakai, the rabbi of the Churban, the rabbi who saw the Beis Hamikdash destroyed. Yochanan ben Zakkai. Sheshama mirabo, v'rabba mirabo, halacha l'moshe misinai again, halacha l'moshe misinai, just like a kanoi. It's halacha l'moshe misinai. She'ein Eliyahu ba. What's the purpose of Eliyahu? L'tamei l'taher l'rachek l'akarev. Here, you would think it would be logical. The Eliyahu's job is to separate out the non-Jews and the Jews. Those who are kosher to be married to, those who are not kosher to be married to. You would think. And the Mishnah then in the Havamina says, okay, yeah, but he's only going to bring back those who were pushed away. Tanakama says he'll sort it out. And they give an example of Mishpachas Beit Srifa and another Mishpacha that Ben Sion, who was the ruler at the time. They weren't kosher to be married to Jews. They were mamzerim or whatever they were. They were non-Jews. And they brought one of that family in, and then this kosher family called Beit Srifa was pushed away. So maybe Eliyahu was going to come for that, to sort out who's Jewish and who's not Jewish, which would be a very big thing to do today. Very big job. People who come forward as Jews, who knows who's Jewish anymore? But Rabbi Yehuda disagrees, and he says, "Lekarev avalol rachek." Eliyahu can only bring not separation. We're past the point of kanos. We're up to the point of shalom, and we'll bring people back. Lekarev, and Rabbi Yehuda says, Rabbi Shimon says, even more shalom. Lahafshos machlokas. We say in any Gemara query, but we don't understand the answer. Despite all our logical investigation into the halacha, we can't come up with an answer. We say, Teku, Tishbu Yitaretz, Kushos Abayos, Eliyahu represent the end of machlokas, even within the realm of halacha. And Chachamim say, no, it's not that, but something much more profound. It's going to make peace between Jewish people in the entire world. As it says, what does that mean? What does that have to do with the world? Fathers should embrace sons, sons should embrace fathers. That's Jewish. What does that have to do with the world? The answer is, if we have that kind of passion, acceptance, and unconditional love, the rest of the world will follow. The rest of the world will want us. I don't know if I mentioned this, but there was this very, very famous black rapper who was a big anti-Semite, and people questioned him about it. I think he sold t-shirts with swastikas. And then he was interviewed and said, "Why are you such an anti-Semite?" He says, I'm not anti-Jewish. I want to be a Jew. I don't want them to be Jews. I want to be the Jew. Why? Jews are successful in business because they get along. They don't fight with each other. He thinks. And they stay with their wives. What is he saying? The Jewish people have shalom. They have shalom with each other to pursue financial gain. They have shalom with each other, shalom bayis, to keep families intact. He says, that's what I want to be. I don't hate the Jews. I'm jealous of the Jews, he said. That's what this message is. The world should be jealous of the Jews, not antagonistic towards the Jews. We have a long way to go. Hashem Yirachim. But we're on the right path. And we're very, very close. Mr. Hashem, it should be that these 9 days that are coming up, beginning next Friday, transformed mema'atim b'simcha. We take away the pain of the exile by introducing simcha. But which simcha? Simcha shel mitzvah, that we can do. Simcha shel Torah, that we can do. And ironically, isn't it interesting that the whole war is about Simchas Torah, which is precisely the demonstration of passion and love for Torah? That was the day in which we were attacked. Coming up soon on 2 years. Okay, there's a message there. Hashem should give us koach to kedusha, going out of the book, going out of the midbar, going out of the desert, and entering into the Devarim, the words that usher us into big Yeshuas. Let's hope that these 10 days, 9 days, will produce shalom inside the Jewish people. Who knows what will happen when we will daven, that we will have joy, reasons to be joyous this year, even more than any other. Thank you.
יש שם שיר חדש